You can't test drive that. People like you don't usually buy cars like this. The words didn't echo by accident. They echoed because they were meant to. They landed not just in her ears, but in the open air of a quiet, luxury showroom where silence often passed for civility. The room didn't stop. It just paused, subtly. The way privileged places do when something breaches the script. A few heads turned not in protest, but with the bored curiosity of people who've seen this play before. Amelia didn't flinch. Welcome to Unveiled Wealth, where power doesn't raise its voice, and judgment always comes dressed in a suit. In a world obsessed with appearances, we tell stories that reveal what happens when someone quietly flips the script. If you believe respect shouldn't be earned by labels or lost because of looks, subscribe and stay with us. Because here, the ones they ignore usually own the room. She stood just inside the entrance in clothes that didn't shout or shimmer. A soft cardigan in sand-colored cotton, the fabric thinning slightly at the elbows. A floral dress that moved gently with the air conditioning cool and regulated like everything else in this place. Her purse was fabric too. Not aged, not worn out, just used. Familiar, siennosor, erfunden. She looked like someone who chose comfort on purpose, not because of price. And yet to this room she didn't read as presence. She read as background. The man who delivered the line, Gregory Norton, stood with one hand still resting on the glossy black roof of the Baleza GT. His name badge gleamed like it had been polished more recently than his conscience. His suit fit well, but too loud in its tailoring. His posture carried that easy arrogance reserved for men who mistake commission for character. And he was already looking away toward a younger couple walking in their sneakers, spotless. Their laugh just expensive enough. No one moved to help her. No one offered a greeting, not even a brochure. She remained there long enough for her silence to become inconvenient. Then without drama, without hesitation, she walked. Her flats didn't squeak. Her steps didn't announce. But when she passed by the espresso station and took a seat near the edge of the room, the click of her purse clasp sounded like punctuation. She adjusted her dress with small habitual movements, neither nervous nor idle. Just intentional. Her eyes scanned not for vehicles, but for people. Gregory now pouring water for the young couple. Kenneth Peterson leaning half out of his office like a marionette whose strings were tied to status cues. The receptionist, all smooth gestures and rehearsed smiles, avoided Amelia's eyeline, like contact might stain her reputation. The showroom glowed with engineered polish, leather-scented air chrome edges, catching cold blue light, minimalist tables that said, "Don't touch." It was less a place to shop, more a place to perform. But Amelia didn't perform. She observed. She absorbed. She let the space try to ignore her. And in doing so, she turned invisible into inevitable. Because while she sat still quiet, unremarkable, something happened. The kind of thing that never makes noise until it's too late. She became a variable. The kind no one plans for. The kind that reveals whether your system works. Or just pretends to. She wasn't surprised by Gregory's words. She'd heard them before. Maybe not those exact ones, but the sentiment wore the same cologne. She didn't carry outrage in her purse. She carried memory. Pattern, proof for dishonour. The truth she did belong here. More than that, she owned it. Not in theory, not in aspiration, but legally, structurally, quietly. But none of that needed to be said today, because today wasn't her test. It was theirs. The sunlight had started its slow descent across the showroom floor, not in haste, but in long apologetic strokes of amber, brushing across glass, steel, and spotless tile. It didn't settle on Amelia. It went around her, like even the light had been briefed on who to highlight and who to let fade. She didn't mind. She wasn't here for illumination. She was here to listen. And what she heard wasn't sound, it was hierarchy. She sat still, not frozen, not hiding, just aware. Her hands rested gently on her lap, fingers woven together in a way that suggested patience, not passivity. Her breathing was deep and steady, but never forced. A long inhale that didn't tremble, a slow exhale that didn't apologize. Her stillness wasn't a pause, it was presence. Around her, the dealership continued its soft theater. A chuckle from one corner clipped footsteps from another. Two salesmen, blazers, sharp hair sharper, passed by, whispering something that made one of them smirk while glancing her way. They weren't subtle. It bueno mainana, ikinonan. They didn't have to be. This room had trained them to know exactly who counted and who didn't. Behind the espresso bar, a bell chimed. The hiss of steamed milk followed. The cup was placed on ceramic with the same delicacy used to hand a business card to someone important. Amelia didn't turn. She didn't need to. The ritual was familiar. The sequence didn't change. But this time she wasn't part of the audience. She was the note in the music that didn't belong, and that made all the difference. She observed without effort. A woman in leggings and a Patagonia fleece laughed beside a salesman, explaining a sunroof feature like he'd invented it. No ID checks, no inquiries, just access. And access in places like this had a look, had a profile, had unwritten permissions. You know something? It's always in these places that you see the truth clearest. Not in the policies, but in the pauses. Not in the words, but in who gets asked to speak them. Discrimination here isn't loud. It's refined. But makali 1 year, survive one, sterilized, framed in courtesy and sealed with plausible deniability. But the pattern is there always. And if you've lived long enough or quiet enough or tired enough, you stop needing evidence. You already know. Amelia didn't need anyone to say it out loud. The repetition was already in motion. Kenneth peeked from his office again, then vanished. The receptionist smiled at a man in a suit, then turned stoic when Amelia shifted in her seat. Even the way the doors opened seemed faster for others. She leaned back, letting her shadow stretch further under the glass coffee table. It cast across the white tile like a question no one wanted to answer. No one looked at it, but it was there. And like most overlooked things, it saw everything. Then it happened. A glance. Quick, at Kurnichun, unintended. But Gregory looked, and in that flicker, that instant of recognition too fast for denial, Amelia saw what she had been waiting for. Not an apology, not a change in tone, but the tightening of a man's posture when he realizes the person he dismissed is still watching, and that was enough. Sometimes silence is surveillance. She stood again, not rushed, not reactive, just ready. There so. The sun had dropped slightly lower, casting a deeper gold across the tile and hitting the black Balesa GT in the center of the showroom like a spotlight on a lie. Its hood glistened with the kind of shine you can't trust, but she didn't hesitate. One fingertip traced the curve of the driver's side mirror, and that alone was enough to summon him. Back for another look, Gregory's voice came laced with the kind of sugar that stings a little syrup sweet, 2 degrees too loud, trying to own the air before she could. He stepped forward, posture half welcome, half possessive. Amelia turned. Her tone was simple, neutral, but not neutralized. It's a beautiful vehicle. I was wondering about the specs. Of course, the way he approached said more than his words. Each step was a blend of strut and calculation, the gait of a man used to controlling the script. He was hoping something had changed. Something that made her look more like the customers he wanted to impress. This is the Balesa GT, he began, tone flat like a voicemail. Twin-turbo V8, adaptive suspension, premium leather interior. Integrated smart system with voice control. He didn't care about the car. He cared about closing. Just not with her. Amelia nodded slowly, hand resting lightly on the roof. Her touch didn't press, didn't linger. I'd like to schedule a test drive, she said like she was ordering coffee. Calm, precise. The shift was instant. Gregory's posture tense beneath his blazer. Well, for vehicles in this tier, he began clearing his throat to stall for authority. We typically require a financial pre-screening. You understand, right? It's just a security measure. There it was. And here's where I tell you, this is the most dangerous kind of no. The kind dressed up in courtesy, dipped in policy, wrapped in disclaimers and warm tones so that when you walk away, they can still claim it was fair. This isn't bias in boots. This is bias in brogues. But Amelia didn't flinch, didn't explain, didn't blink. She simply met his gaze and replied, I'd be happy to pay in full. Today. Gregory's smile held, then twitched again this time, betraying tension beneath the teeth. Even so, he said, his voice slipping into a chill metallic edge. We have to verify funds before allowing a test drive. I'm sure you understand. She didn't answer. Not immediately. She just stood steady, letting the silence hang until even the tiles seemed to shrink. Behind them, the faint sound of a pen tapping a clipboard cut the air. A rhythm of authority on the move. Kenneth Peterson emerged from his glass office silhouette clean-cut against the LED glow. His suit looked like it had never been folded. His face like it hadn't been questioned in years. Is there a problem, Gregory? He asked, tone clipped, as his eyes slid to Amelia like a fingerprint left on glass. Gregory shifted his voice, dropping an octave into caution. Missy hasn't provided documentation yet, but she's asking for a Belleza GT test. Kenneth smiled. Not the kind that welcomes you. The kind that wraps you in velvet and pushes you off a ledge. Of course. Let's talk in my office. He gestured to the door. Amelia didn't hesitate. She walked past both men as if their titles were irrelevant, their posture invisible. And when the door shut behind her, it didn't close a room. It opened a match. Because what they didn't know was that the game had already started. And she didn't come to play. She came to audit. The office was quiet, not peaceful, but curated. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from stillness, but from design. Like a luxury watch boutique where silence isn't a byproduct, but a feature, deliberate, sculpted, almost staged. The walls were matte, the lighting soft without warmth, and every surface looked like it had been wiped seconds before she entered. Kenneth gestured toward the sleek leather chair across from his desk, the kind made to look comfortable but built for short visits. Amelia sat with calm precision, a detail the room wouldn't miss. Neither would Kenneth. He smiled, not too wide, not too warm. The kind of smile corporate training recommends for challenging demographics. I understand you're interested in the Belleza GT. He began, fingers laced like he was about to open a negotiation, not a conversation. She didn't lean back. She didn't shift. She met his gaze like it was air, not something to fear, not something to fight, just something to breathe. Yes, she said plainly. It fits everything I'm looking for. Kenneth nodded once the motion slow managerial. May I ask what you'll be using it for? We try to match our clients with vehicles suited to their lifestyle. The word lingered a half-second longer than it needed to. Lifestyle. Like he was trying to guess a tax bracket from her breath. Commuting between Chicago and Milwaukee, she replied evenly. I value safety, comfort, and I appreciate quality. Understandable, he said, his voice dipped in empathy, but sharpened by suspicion. Though we do have other models that offer similar reliability at more accessible price points. There it was. The nudge. Heben, Demnia, you aren't dern. Not rude. Not even offensive, just disqualifying. Gregory, still standing near the door, stayed perfectly still. His eyes weren't on her, but on the wall, specifically a photo frame of a dealership award dated 2019. She noticed. So did he. He hadn't earned another since. And here's where I always hold my breath. Because they never say you don't belong here. They say, let's find something that fits you better. As if fit was a matter of fabric and face. As if the idea of value had a dress code. Exclusion here doesn't slam the door. It lets you walk into a hallway that leads nowhere. Amelia leaned forward just a few degrees, not to challenge. Just to shift the balance. 130 yuan, Shishuri. I appreciate your concern, she said, her voice as smooth as his desk lacquer. But the Belleza GT is the one I want. Kenneth's smile didn't fade. It just tightened. A muscle flexing under discomfort. I see. Well, typically we do require some financial verification before arranging test drives for our premium line. I'm sure you understand. There it was again. And now answer. That phrase, if for to return, I'm sure you understand. It's the velvet rope of corporate America. Polite, gerserman, wordless, weaponized. It says everything without leaving fingerprints. Amelia reached into her bag, pulling out her phone with practiced ease. The case was worn at the corners, softened by time like someone who had used it often, but never to prove herself. I can show you my balance. Kenneth raised a hand, a fraction too quickly. Perhaps we should speak with someone from our finance team. They handle this sort of thing. His tone softened, but not with empathy. With management, Amelia's eyes didn't shift. Is that policy, she asked, or discretion? He blinked, just once. That single moment when reflex fails before the brain catches up. Policy, he said, after just enough pause to make the truth louder than the word itself. Through the glass wall behind him, sunlight caught the curve of a red sports coupe. A man in jeans was stepping into the driver's seat. No clipboard, no manager, no screening. Just a handshake and a smile. No one asked him if the car fit his lifestyle. He was just handed access. Kenneth leaned back in his chair with the casual authority of someone who thought the room belonged to him. The sun had dipped just far enough outside to let the recessed lights take over a soft, sterile glow that washed the office in that flat corporate tone meant to feel professional but never warm. Behind Amelia, one of the track lights bounced off the showroom window, casting a faint reflection of her silhouette on the glass wall. It looked like she was sitting at both sides of the desk, a witness and a mirror. We have a lot of clients who love the look of the belleza. Kenneth continued, his voice smooth, like polished veneer. But sometimes what appeals visually doesn't always translate into the right fit functionally. Gregory stood to the side, now arms crossed in the exact posture that said, "We've done this 100 times and you're not special." Amelia didn't blink. What would you suggest for someone who drives 2 hours a day, carries no passengers but values, performance, comfort, and reliability? She asked, tone as soft as if she were asking about the weather. Kenneth hesitated for half a second, just long enough. Well, there are some excellent certified pre-owned options, even a few hybrid sedans with great mileage and lower insurance thresholds. We're here to match people with what suits them best. There it is again, suitability. It sounds so harmless, like helping an old friend pick out shoes. But in places like this, suitable is a gate. A velvet rope made of fake compliments and laminated policies. Amelia smiled politely. I wasn't aware this was an interview. Not at all, Kenneth said quickly, raising a hand. Just a standard practice. We like to get to know our clients, build a rapport. It's how we keep our standards high. High for whom? That was the real question. From her chair, Amelia could see through the glass walls to the showroom floor. A young man in basketball shorts was now being shown a bright yellow coupe by a female salesperson. The man gestured animatedly and she laughed. No clipboard. No finance manager. No protocol. The contrast hit like a draft in a closed room. You seem hesitant, Kenneth said gently, the first crack in his composure showing through the gloss. Is there something we can clarify for you? Yes, Amelia replied, tone still light. I'd like to know if the policy you're referring to applies to all walk-ins, or just ones wearing cardigans. Gregory shifted. Kenneth blinked. I beg your pardon. She didn't repeat it. The silence after that question didn't feel like a pause. It felt like a thread being pulled, and the fabric was about to come undone. The air in the office didn't change temperature, but it felt colder. Kenneth cleared his throat, not the kind that precedes a cough, but the kind that fills a silence you can't answer. His fingers toyed with the Mont Blanc pen on his desk, flipping it end to end with the quiet rhythm of someone hoping distraction would pass for composure. I assure you, miss. Just Amelia, she said. He nodded once. Amelia. We follow the same policies for everyone. From across the glass wall, laughter echoed faintly. The young man in basketball shorts now sat inside the yellow coupe doors, open engine purring. The color glowed against the dimming light outside like someone had parked a fire in the middle of the showroom. Amelia didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. Interesting, she said, voice as level as marble. Then your colleague must be skipping steps. Gregory shifted behind her, adjusting his collar. Exceptions do happen, Kenneth replied a little too quickly. Sometimes we're familiar with the client or they've pre-qualified online. Did you verify that? Silence. And that right there was the thing. Power doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just waits long enough for the other side to say too much. Kenneth leaned back, smile fading into something tighter. Is there something you're trying to imply, Amelia? Her head tilted slightly the way a teacher might before asking a student to read the last line again. I'm simply comparing how policy moves when no one thinks it's being watched. Boom. The line didn't drop like a mic. It settled like a gavel. Gregory took a half step forward, then thought better of it. Outside the office, the woman at reception was no longer pretending to type. Her eyes were locked on the scene, like she was watching someone lean just a little too far over a balcony. Kenneth drew in a slow breath through his nose, sat up straighter. "Look," he said, palms opening as if to offer her something invisible. "We want all of our guests to feel comfortable. That includes safety expectations and experience. For everyone involved." There it was. Everyone involved. It sounds neutral, fair, corporate. To le section et connexion. But when people say that to your face while someone else has handed keys behind you, it doesn't mean everyone. It means not you. Gregory was shifting his weight more now. First one foot, then the other. Not enough to call attention, but enough for someone like Amelia to notice. Kenneth, on the other hand, had moved from composed to guarded. His voice hadn't risen, but his posture had stiffened by degrees. And that was the funny thing about men like him. They didn't yell when they lost control. They just got quieter in all the wrong places. The sun was almost gone now, its last light casting a deep orange sheen along the edges of the office wall. Through the tinted glass, the yellow sports coupe outside glowed like an exposed nerve, a symbol of everything this place wanted to sell, but didn't know how to honor. Amelia's gaze moved not fast, not accusing, but slow, deliberate toward that car, then back to Kenneth. No words, just a look, and in that silence something shifted. Kenneth cleared his throat again, slower this time. "You must understand we're simply following procedures designed to maintain integrity across the board." Amelia tilted her head. "Whose board?" Gregory blinked. Kenneth hesitated. A fraction of a second too long. Enough to tell anyone paying attention that he hadn't expected to be questioned with precision. That was the thing about power games. They fall apart the moment you demand definitions. From behind the desk, Kenneth adjusted his papers. Not because he needed to, but because he needed to do something. Anything? The pen, the portfolio, the repositioning of his chair. It was all choreography meant to delay a response he hadn't prepared. And here's the truth. People don't get uncomfortable when you raise your voice. They get uncomfortable when you hold their gaze and say nothing. Because silence, when delivered with clarity, is a mirror. And not everyone likes what it reflects. From outside the glass, a faint movement drew Amelia's eye. The receptionist, the one who had avoided eye contact earlier, was now watching openly. No longer pretending, just watching. Her expression wasn't dramatic. No gasp, no wide eyes. Just awareness, the beginning of a shift. Gregory finally spoke. "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I apologize if anything was misunderstood." Amelia offered a soft smile. "I haven't misunderstood anything." The quiet that followed was not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that buzzed behind the ears. The kind that made people look at each other but not say a word. And in that quiet, the hierarchy of the room began to tilt. Not all at once. Not like a collapse. More like a table leg beginning to crack. And you know something, I've always found it fascinating, how quickly politeness evaporates the moment someone realizes they've underestimated the wrong person. It doesn't scream. It just recoils like a hand burned by something it thought was cold. It started with a cough. Not from Amelia. Not from Kenneth or Gregory. But from somewhere just outside the glass wall of the office. A soft single cough, quick, contained, but deliberate. Like someone clearing not just their throat, but the line between observer and participant. Amelia didn't turn, but Kenneth did. A flick of the eyes toward the source, and for the first time since she sat down, his facade cracked wider than a pause. Standing just beyond the doorway was Erin, one of the newer associates, young, soft-spoken, barely noticed most days. Her hands were clasped in front of her, but her stance had weight. She didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough to reset the tempo of the room. Kenneth straightened. "Erin, do you need something?" Erin hesitated for just a breath. Then, without glancing at Gregory, she said, "I was about to take the red Beleza out for a customer test drive," but her voice trailed, landing like a stone in still water. Gregory stiffened. Kenneth blinked twice. The room froze. For one full second, the only thing moving was the soft hum of the showroom AC, brushing against the blinds like a whisper trying not to be overheard. Amelia didn't move, but the edge of her smile returned. Just barely. A flicker of acknowledgement. "The red one?" she asked softly, finally turning her head. "Yes," Erin replied, this time steadier. "The one you asked about." Gregory opened his mouth, but no words came out. Kenneth stood as if that would somehow restore command. We were just about to finalize the discussion, he said quickly. Aaron nodded. I just wanted to be sure we weren't double booking test drives. I wouldn't want to inconvenience Ms. Richardson. Silence again. This time with weight. It's funny how truth doesn't need volume. Sometimes all it takes is a third pair of eyes. A voice that doesn't ask permission to notice. Erin didn't accuse anyone. She didn't take sides. She just named the contradiction out loud. And that more than anything unsettled the system. Amelia stood slowly, her chair sliding back with a sound too clean to ignore. I appreciate that, Erin. She said, her voice as calm as ever, but now carrying an edge like velvet lined with steel. She looked at Kenneth. I'd like to proceed with the test drive, unless your policy has changed again. Amelia walked beside Erin through the glass doors of the office. Her steps measured soundless, but somehow louder than Gregory's entire presentation 5 minutes earlier. The red Balesa GT sat gleaming near the entry ramp, its crimson frame catching the last of the dying daylight. Under that light, it didn't look like a car. It looked like a spotlight, a mirror, a stage. Gregory followed 2 steps behind, silent now. Kenneth stayed behind in the office, hands still resting on the back of the chair Amelia had just vacated, as if he hadn't yet figured out whether he should sit back down or fall into it. Erin walked with purpose, no longer the background character in a showroom opera. When they reached the car, she opened the passenger door and turned to Amelia. Would you like to drive alone, or would you prefer I join you for the route overview? Amelia smiled. I think a little company would be nice. Gregory, still hovering nearby, opened his mouth to insert himself, but Erin's glance cut him off without a word. For the first time since the conversation began, he looked small. The car interior smelled of new leather and just a hint of something floral, a scent diffused into the upholstery by design, meant to evoke calm. But calm was not what the room behind the glass was feeling. As Amelia adjusted the seat and mirrors, she caught movement in the rear view. A man had entered the showroom, mid-50s, tailored charcoal blazer silver at the temple's presence. Quiet but gravitational. He stopped near the receptionist desk, eyes scanning the room. Amelia didn't smile, but her eyes changed. Daniel's early, she said softly. Erin glanced at her. Daniel, sorry you never said to. Amelia said nothing more. The engine purred to life. Inside, Kenneth emerged from the office, face composed but posture tight. The receptionist leaned in toward the newcomer. Can I help you, sir? The man gave a polite smile. I'm here to meet someone. Do you have an appointment? Not exactly, he replied. But she does. Erin looked into the side mirror, then back at Amelia. Is that your husband? Amelia nodded once. Wait, Erin whispered, realization dawning slow but sharp. Richardson, as in Richardson Auto Group. Amelia didn't confirm. She didn't need to. The quiet curve of her lips was enough. And suddenly Erin stood a little straighter. The sound that broke the tension wasn't a voice or a door or even a word. It was the click of leather soles on tiles, slow, precise, confident. The kind of footsteps that didn't need to rush, because they already knew exactly where they were going. Every head in the showroom turned. Daniel didn't look away from Amelia, but Kenneth and Gregory did. They looked toward the entrance, toward the man, now walking through the front doors like he'd walked through them 100 times before. Older, maybe late 60s, but sharp, the kind of sharp you didn't lose with age, only refine. Navy suit, open collar, and a wristwatch that didn't flash. Just quietly said, I've arrived on time my whole life. He paused at the edge of the main floor, scanning the room. His eyes landed on Amelia, and they stayed there. Well, I'll be damned, he said, not loud, but with the kind of warmth that cut through glass. Amelia Richardson, I didn't expect to see you here until next week. Kenneth turned pale. Gregory blinked. You know her. The man laughed once, shaking his head. Know her. I've served with her on 2 advisory boards and watched her rebuild an entire division faster than our last CEO could remember the receptionist's name. He stepped closer now, addressing Amelia directly. You never did like grand entrances. Amelia smiled, not broadly, just enough to soften the room. Sometimes it helps to enter quietly just to hear how people speak, when they think no one important is listening. And in that moment, you could hear the air change. The room didn't just go silent. It went inward, as if the walls themselves had become self-conscious. Daniel let out the faintest breath, a satisfied exhale from someone who knew this was no longer a reveal. This was an audit. Aaron looked from Amelia to the man in the navy suit. Mr. Lyle, she said softly, I didn't realize you were connected to the Richardson Group. Retired mostly, he replied with a wink. But I still answer calls from people who change industries. Gregory took a half step back. Kenneth tried to recover. We were just about to conduct a full walkthrough. This was never meant to be dismissive. Mr. Lyle's gaze landed on him now. Son, let me offer you something I learned the hard way. If you ever find yourself explaining why something wasn't disrespectful, it probably was. Kenneth took a step forward, the kind that tried to be confident but landed somewhere between desperation and denial. He adjusted his jacket with one hand, gestured vaguely toward the red Beleza still humming near the test drive exit. Of course, Mrs. Richardson, we're more than happy to prepare the vehicle now. Just a simple misunderstanding earlier. Gregory, sensing the tide shift in real time, jumped in. If there's anything I can personally do to assist moving forward, perhaps a custom configuration or upgraded delivery terms, we'd be honored to offer it. Their voices overlapped in that brittle corporate harmony only heard when damage control is being broadcast through a smile. Amelia didn't move from her seat. Her hands rested lightly on her lap. Fingers relaxed, one thumb brushing gently across the other in an absent rhythmic motion. But her silence filled the space faster than any apology. Daniel leaned against the hood of the car, now arms folded, watching the men try to swim back across a river they had built from their own assumptions. Funny, he said, not to anyone in particular. Earlier I walked in and no one even offered me water. Mr. Lyle let out a single exhale through his nose, amused but not forgiving. And here's something I've learned: when people realize they were wrong about who holds the power, they rarely apologize for the mistake. They try to erase it, reframe it, pretend they meant something else. Kenneth cleared his throat again. We were just following procedure. We treat all clients with the utmost professionalism, except when they're wearing cardigans, Aaron muttered just loud enough to be heard. The line cracked the silence like ice underfoot. No one laughed, but everyone heard it. Gregory's smile faltered completely now. It's been a hectic day, Gregory, Daniel said calmly. You said something to my wife when she asked for a test drive. What was it again? Gregory opened his mouth, then closed it, swallowed. I may have said, something like it wasn't standard without financial screening. No, Amelia corrected gently. You said people like you don't usually buy cars like this. Gregory paled. The silence this time wasn't just awkward, it was damning. And in that stillness, the showroom finally understood that this wasn't just a mistake. It was a report card, and they had already handed it in. Gregory stepped closer to the car, a nervous energy pulling at his features like someone trying to fasten a suit too tight. Mrs. Richardson, I must say it's really quite an honor to meet you. We've long admired the way Richardson Auto Group handles customer relationships. Your leadership style, it's inspiring. His words came out like they'd been stored too long in the back of his throat, dry, clunky, overly rehearsed. Kenneth, not to be outdone, added quickly, absolutely. Your presence here today, it's actually a valuable opportunity for us to reassess things, see what we can improve. Amelia didn't answer right away. She was tracing the edge of the gear shift with one finger, feeling the smooth matte finish, like she was reading the texture of the moment itself. Her face stayed neutral, calm, but not casual. Because calm isn't always softness. Sometimes calm is preparation. Aaron watched from a few feet away, arms loosely crossed. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. The truth was speaking for itself now, loudest through the men who were suddenly on their best behavior. And here's the thing about best behavior. If it only shows up when you recognize someone's title, it was never about respect. It was about calculation. Gregory smiled too wide. If there's anything I can personally handle, future arrangements, preferred access, concierge scheduling, we'd be thrilled to accommodate. Kenneth nodded, posture now just shy of a bow. Perhaps a private walkthrough of our new inventory. Some of our latest imports just arrived. There's a metallic gold model I think you'd love. Stunning profile. Limited production. Daniel raised an eyebrow, amused. The one that sat unsold for 3 months. Gregory cleared his throat. We were Maitonur, Worcesterman Timon, sir, repositioning its value proposition. Amelia finally looked up. I didn't come here to be flattered. I came here to be forgotten. And you did that part perfectly. The words weren't angry. They were quiet, surgical, like a pin dropping in a vacuum followed by the sound of assumptions imploding. Gregory stepped back slightly, shoulders tightening beneath his tailored blazer, as if the fabric might shield him from the weight of his own performance. Of course, Mrs. Richardson, we completely understand. Sometimes we all misread situations. Kenneth nodded in sync, the choreography of retreat now fully in motion. Misread, yes, and perhaps a bit of internal retraining wouldn't hurt. We've been due for a culture refresh. Aaron's gaze stayed fixed on both of them, not judging, not intervening, just watching the shift. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a study, and they were proving the thesis with every breath. Daniel walked toward the reception counter, his hand grazing its edge as if testing its foundation. Actually, Amelia, he said, turning slightly before we go, would you be willing to try something? She looked at him. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Moments later, Amelia re-entered the showroom alone. Daniel remained by the exit, hands in pockets, posture still, but engaged. Aaron had discreetly slipped away toward the service wing. Gregory and Kenneth remained where they were now, pretending to check displays and tablets, anything that might signal purpose. Amelia walked up to the front desk. The receptionist, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge what had just unfolded, looked up. Can I help you? Amelia smiled softly, adjusting the strap of her purse. Yes, I was wondering if I could get some information on the red Bellesa GT out front. It's beautiful. The receptionist paused, eyes moving across Amelia's outfit. Still the same beige cardigan, still the floral dress. Then she blinked, looked down at her screen. We usually require pre-qualification for test drives of that model, she said automatically. And there it was. Same tone, same reflex. Kenneth, hearing this, began walking quickly across the floor, panic now creeping into his expression. No, that won't be necessary, he said too loud. Mrs. Richardson is a special guest. But Amelia raised a hand. No need to interrupt, she said. I'm just seeing how deep the roots go. Gregory looked like he might actually sit down. On the floor, it's Cheshire. Daniel chuckled. Quiet, low, but undeniable. You know what I love most about these moments? They don't collapse because of confrontation. They collapse because someone finally said, let's run that scene again. But this time I know the ending. Emilio Manadiri Mentro. And suddenly nothing holds. By the time Kenneth stepped back, realizing too late what his interruption revealed, the room had already decided something, not out loud, not by vote, but by breath. There are moments in a place, any place, when the air becomes heavier, not because of heat, but because of clarity. When excuses stop circulating, when hierarchy softens. This was one of those moments. Amelia looked back at the receptionist, her gaze not sharp, but weighted like someone who wasn't angry, just deeply familiar with the shape of systemic failure. You were just following what you were taught, she said, her voice soft enough to soothe but firm enough to land. And that's exactly the problem. The young woman swallowed, then nodded. Just once. Daniel crossed the floor slowly now, no longer just an observer. He stopped near the sales podium and looked around, his voice calm, but with the unmistakable cadence of finality. As of next week, this location will formally transition under Richardson Auto. There will be structural changes, some visible, some cultural, Gregory straightened. Kenneth said nothing. Daniel continued. We're not just changing logos. We're reevaluating practices, especially ones that don't show up in training manuals, but do show up in judgment tone. And who gets offered coffee first? You could feel the energy shift under that sentence. Not anger, but ownership. Erin reappeared from the service corridor. She didn't speak. She just stood there behind the line of salesmen, as if choosing where she stood now mattered more than it ever had before. Amelia stepped beside Daniel. She didn't announce anything, didn't declare victory. She just stood. And somehow that was louder. Because when someone who was overlooked begins to take up space and doesn't ask permission to do it, you start to realize just how many spaces weren't built to include them in the first place. Kenneth's hands were behind his back again, and the rest of the room finally exhaled. The engine cut off and the door opened with that signature luxury click, clean, unhurried. Amelia stepped out slowly, adjusting the same beige cardigan she had worn the first time she set foot in this building. It still hung loose around her frame, still paired with the floral dress. The only new thing was the way people looked at her. "Good morning, Mrs. Richardson. Sir, sir. We were told you might stop by." His voice wasn't performative. It wasn't nervous. It was steady, practiced in the way respect should be, not out of fear, but recognition. Actually, Amelia set her tone light but anchored. "I'm here as a customer today. I'd like to test drive the Bellesa GT. Thomas didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. The keys are ready whenever you are." Inside the showroom looked different. Not just the updated branding, though the signage had changed and the uniforms too, but the posture. People moved differently. Less performative, more alert, more real. At the corner, a new receptionist stood straighter when Amelia passed. Not out of panic, out of presence, out of understanding. And as she settled into the driver's seat, the scent of the leather, the feel of the steering wheel, the faint vibration of the engine waiting to breathe, it all felt like closure. Daniel stood by the side window, one hand in his pocket, watching. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. But his eyes said everything. Because there's something powerful about returning to the same place, wearing the same clothes, but making it clear it's the room that's changed, not you. And if this story meant something to you, if you've ever been mistaken, dismissed, or overlooked, drop a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes the quietest voices carry the biggest truths.